Direct from the Golden Hill Broadcast Center, this is Talk of the Town on KNSJ with former San Diego City Attorney Mike Aguirre, attorney and former political science professor Douglas Holbrook, and our special guest, John Baker.
This is Mike Aguirre.
And I'm Douglas Holbrook, and today on Perspectives we have perhaps a little bit different type of show. Mike, in the past, we have talked about the quality of our presidents and compared and contrasted them. What I'd like to do today, if you're game, would be if you had the opportunity to engage in a dialogue with some of our recent past presidents. I'm curious, what would that dialogue sound like, and what would be the lead-in question that you would like to ask of any of our presidents? For example, if we were to start with George W. Bush, what would the lead-in question be that you might want to engage him?
Oh, Douglas, that is a great idea. You know, if we could bring George W. Bush on our show, the first thing I'd like to ask him is something that I've been thinking about ever since I watched the recent documentary on his presidency. I'd like to ask, you know, Mr. President, how come you and Cheney got into all those fights at the end of your term there? What was that all about, Mr. President?
Fighting. We was arguing.
Arguing about what?
I just finally put my foot down the deck and said, "Hey, I'm not going hunting with you."
Now, Mr. President, I don't mean to laugh, but are you suggesting that the trust between the two of you had broken down there a little bit?
Well, I was the commander-in-chief, and I let everybody know that, including Dick.
And I take it he didn't go along with that?
Well, most of the time, behind the scenes, he was kind of running the show, if you know what I mean.
Well, I noticed that whenever I see a documentary on your administration, your 8 years, I expect to see a lot of you, and what I really see, it's mostly about Dick Cheney. Why is that?
Well, I think most people would rather see Dick.
What about that? You know, now, Mr. President, I saw there was a documentary where it showed that during 9/11 that Vice President Cheney was actually at the White House, and you were out in Kansas or Nebraska. What was that all about?
Well, actually, I was in Florida. I was talking to a small group of kids when I got the word, and I wasn't quite sure what to do. So they escorted me to an airplane, got on the airplane, and then I was told there was no telephone, so I don't know what the hell happened at that point.
And then next thing you knew, you woke up and you were in Kansas?
Yeah, kind of like Dorothy.
Yeah, only she wasn't in Kansas anymore, and she left, and now you were in Kansas. You sort of like took her place?
How'd you get back home? Just like Dorothy.
I called my dad.
What'd he tell you?
He told me, act like a man. So I did.
What did that look like?
It was ugly. That's what I was told.
Where was your wife? Where was the First Lady when you were out in Kansas?
Who cares?
You know, during other administrations, I've noticed many presidents would come and talk to college classes or Nobel Prize winners. I noticed so often, they often had you talking to kindergarten classes and first graders. Why was that?
Well, that's an easy one right there.
Good. I was hoping I'd give you a softball.
Yeah, well, it actually wasn't a softball, but what it was right there was I kind of spoke on their level.
Ah.
Did you ever talk to them? Now, did you ever try to explain?
Did you have to talk up to them or down to them?
Actually, they had to cut it short because the kids were getting bored.
Did you ever try to tell them about those weapons of mass destruction?
Well, we had a little demonstration of that. I had the kids hide their water pistols. And, for the life of me, I couldn't find them.
Well, now I think we're about out of time with this president. I don't know if we have. Do you have any more questions?
I think we're out of line.
Maybe. I think he may not have any more left to say.
I guess you guys must think this is funny, but it sure ain't to me because we're still looking for them water pistols.
What would be your first clue that we think this is funny?
Now, how did you feel? Did you feel that I keep reading all these reports about the greatest presidents, and you don't seem to be making the list. How does that make you feel, Mr. President? What's that about?
I'd have to say that's probably because of left-wing media. It probably doesn't give me my just due.
But I mean, these are being put together by historians and people that are political scientists, and they're saying that you're ranking towards the bottom of the list of the presidents. Now, you think that's just unfair, or do you think that's deserved?
Well, like what we say in Texas, somebody's got to be first and somebody's got to be last.
Is that what they say in Texas?
Well, I just made that up.
Well, that's pretty good.
Do you remember that phrase? You can fool all the people some of the time. You never did. You
Fool
were never
me
able.
once, shame on.
Oh, that's what it was.
Shame on
yeah.
you. Shame me twice. Well, still shame on you.
I guess you're still struggling with that one, huh?
Mr. President, do you still think that Saddam Hussein was behind the weapons of mass destruction and also behind the attack on America in 9/11?
Well, I've always been a proponent against sodomy. I don't agree with that.
No, Saddam Hussein.
Oh. We hanged that rascal, didn't we?
I think so. Yeah, Mr. President, any final words before we move on to our next next guest?
As they say in the press conferences, thank you, Mr. President. I think we're at that point.
Okay.
Thank you both for having me here today, and please visit my new library.
Okay. Are there any books in there?
Not yet, but they're still working on it.
Okay. I heard they pulled a couple of your books in there, and there was a few pages that hadn't yet been colored. Was that?
Is that the one, Green Eggs and Ham?
I believe so.
Sam, I am.
Well, Mike,
that
was kind of interesting. If we were to move back in time a little bit and go back to, let's say, the Clinton administration, if we were to be able to do the same thing with Bill Clinton, and engage in some kind of a dialogue, what would you envision your lead-in question to Bill Clinton to be?
Well, that's a really difficult. First of all, I'm so excited about the visit of President Bush, and now we're going to invite President Clinton on the show, and that's if he's able to get on here. The first.
Well, I'm not saying we can invite him. I'm just asking you.
Well,
what would be your first? What would be your lead-in question?
What I want to ask him is that if Hillary gets elected president, is he going to be in charge of the interns? That's really the first question I have.
There you go.
Are you asking me?
Oh my God! It's President Bill Clinton. I can't believe it.
Can you? I could imagine it. I just can't believe it.
Mr. President, I just on all due respect, I was just wondering, given your extensive background with working with the interns in your administration, if that would be one of the assignments that a President Hillary Clinton might give you if you're back in the White House.
I would be proud to accept that challenge, but I don't think she would actually trust me with that one. I do have extensive experience.
So we've heard.
And not that I'm all proud of, but I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Well, that's what I understand, and that's why I say that haven't you lived and learned, and that's not, you're not likely to repeat your...
Or to ask it another way, what have you learned from those experiences?
Yes, from living.
Those experiences.
I would have to say that...
you want to think about that a little bit?
Yeah.
You're kind of speechless, Mr. President. Is this painful for you? Is it a little bit painful?
Yeah, it's a little bit.
Are you able to feel our pain?
Have you had some...
Because we're able to feel yours.
I understand that you went through a little therapy over these experiences, and that you're actually reformed, and you've lost some weight, you've taken care of your heart, and you've also... you've repented, and you're not likely to repeat some of the transgressions in the past. Is that information correct?
I would like to amend some of that. First of all, I have taken good care of myself, and thank you for asking. But also, I think it's no secret that 2016 is coming up. And I think it's a great opportunity for the country to possibly have the first female president here. Actually, she was pretty much president during my administration.
There were rumors to that effect. By the way, if you're just joining us, I'm Douglas Holbrook.
And this is Mike Aguirre, and we're having just an amazing day on this show today.
This is a little bit different than Perspectives has ever done before.
No, it is.
Obviously, we're sitting here talking with former President Bill Clinton.
Wait a minute. Do we have to use our first names?
Well, you can either use your first name or your last name, or both.
Well, we like to call you Mr. President. That's
okay.
But what we're trying to come back to is
how would we refer to you if let's say Hillary became president? What title would you want to carry?
Well, I think the first mate would be good.
Yeah, first mate. So now let's go on though. You did some things with the banks when you were president, and we had some problems with the banks. And have you had a chance to reflect on that? And how do you think a Hillary Clinton administration might deal with the banks and the bankers in the future?
I think she would get us back to where we were in the late 90s, and some of the changes and reforms that we made back then that made us all successful.
And also, what about, would she be having male interns, female interns, or how would that work in the White House?
Well, that's a good question, Mike. I like that.
I think she prefers female.
Okay, let's not go down that road.
Speaking of interns, Bill, do you still have any interaction or communication
with Monica?
With Monica? One of your would you consider her your star intern?
Well, let's just put it this way: nobody likes a big mouth.
Well, some people do.
Well, yeah, I sure did.
Okay, hold on. Okay, now, Mr. President, that's not. We've got to keep this as a general family show that we have on here.
Well, sure it is.
Yeah. So I used to watch you on. On Larry King all the time. You always come on there with Larry King.
I enjoyed Larry.
Yeah. Tell us about that. Tell us what kind of guy was, because Larry King had quite an exciting side life himself. If you might remember a few things that happened to him. Did he ever call and ask for some consoling from you when?
No, actually, it was the other way around. Larry's been married like 8 times. And he helped me out with some of my lonely nights in the Oval Office, I'll tell you that.
Oh, what did that look like?
Let's just say it was messy.
No, well, now look, did he ever come in? Did Larry King ever come in and help, console you and Hillary to try to bring you all together when you're having some of this?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah,
and spare time.
Now, what about
you?
Now, what about? But I know that you're a religious man, and it was rumored that you and Hillary looked to some religious help, some Christian help to get you through your problems when you had some issues in the White House. How did that work?
Well, I think it helped us all. It was a tough time, and it was a tough time for the nation as well. And I certainly don't want to be remembered for that type of legacy, if you know what I mean, towards the end of my administration, but rather than what I did up from 92 on through.
Have you thought, Mr. President, that it might make some sense if Hillary gets elected, you could bring back some of these women and maybe have a reconciliation in the White House, have them all there at the same time, and
I can only hope.
Now, Mr. President, I was thinking about you with your reformed mode, trying to bring everyone together and work out your differences.
I think coming together is a good thing. I think that I certainly have a lot of experience. I wouldn't mind helping my wife with some of the things going along with the country.
Now, there was that lady that sued you. Her name was Jones. I think her name was Paula Jones, wasn't it?
Yeah, Paula Jones. Remember her?
Do you remember? Do you
that
talk
sounds
to her?
like a fictitious name to me.
Do you ever talk to her anymore? You ever been back in her
I don't
circle?
want to go back and start talking about whatever happened in the back seat of a squad car in Arkansas. I don't think that's important.
Or what didn't happen, right?
Or, what didn't happen.
That would be
okay.
a better way of putting it, yes.
Well, so now, Mr. President, would you have, we talked about whether you'd be heading up the interns in the White House in a Hillary Clinton administration. What about, is there any chance, what would be your job there if you went back?
Well, I think my first and most important role would be to support my wife.
What would you say to the public now?
For a change.
if you were to talk to the public about why Hillary should be elected. Let's say you were addressing the Democratic National Convention, and you have thousands of delegates in front of you, and she turns to you like how the President Obama and President Clinton turned to their wives. Now the wife is turning to you to speak out. What would you say to turn the nation or to convince the nation that they should elect Hillary Clinton? What do you think her best attributes are that you would tell them about?
I'm not sure what her best attributes are, but I'd be terrified to kiss her in front of everybody. I'll tell you that.
Mr. President, now seriously, I don't want you to be that candid. What would you say about her to the rest of the nation? You know her best. You're there day in, day out.
I think she's very smart. I think she's connected.
With who?
Well, I've got 17 minutes of tape. That's another story with her and Janet Reno, but I don't want to go into it right now.
Okay, now, Mr. President, again, let me ask you if you could, let's get back on track here now. She's got tremendous experience now. As I understand, I was reading the paper when you had your heart attack. She got there a little bit late, and you were there for some period of time before she actually got there. How did you feel when you found out that she was a little bit delayed?
Relaxed.
Why was that? A lot of people would have been hurt and upset. What was that all
Not
about?
you.
Well, I was. What can you do? I mean, you're just laying there, and I was just hanging out.
Now, did you have female nurses or male nurses, or how did that work?
I had one that sounded like a female when I opened my eyes. But when I opened my eyes, it was a guy named Eric.
Okay, Mr. President, we've really got to get off this. I think
I think we need to ask if he has any final comments.
If you have any final comments,
Any
Mr.
final
President,
thoughts,
anything you
maybe?
want to share? We really appreciate you coming on the show.
I thank you all for the opportunity, and it looks like I'm going to be doing a lot more public speaking in the near future.
Well, we look forward to
We
that.
very much do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
For those of you just joining us, I'm Douglas Holbrook.
And this is Mike Aguirre.
And we have, I would say, a rare treat, rare experience on Perspectives today, because we're able to tap into Mike's mind and let him go back and talk about presidents we've talked about before, and maybe dialogue with them a little bit. But Mike, I want to maybe take a little bit of a detour. We've talked to two former presidents. There is someone on my mind here, and you'll know who I'm speaking of as soon as I say his name, who could have been president, and in an era of reform, he probably thinks he should have been president. And I'm talking about Ross Perot. He ran against Clinton and Bush Sr. He never made it, and as a matter of fact, he dropped out at the last minute. But if we had him in studio today, and we were able to dialogue with him, what would be the questions you'd want to ask him? And I guess most importantly, what might be the lead-in question that you would ask Ross Perot, former presidential candidate, never quite made it, but certainly very prominent former presidential candidate? What one lead-in question would you have?
So I just am so much so excited. We've had President Bush on, now we had President Clinton on, and now Ross Perot. And of course, it was George H.W. Bush and Clinton, President Clinton, and Ross Perot, who all ran against each other. Many people feel that President Clinton was elected in 1992 because of Ross Perot. And so, of course, my first question is, Mr. Perot, many people think that because you ran, you were able to defeat President Bush and elect Bill Clinton. And is that about right? Is that what your intentions were when you realized that you weren't actually going to get elected?
So that would be your question.
That's my first question. If he ever came on our show, I'd love to ask him that question.
I would like to imagine what his answer might be.
Well, I'd like to answer your question with a question.
Oh my God, it's Ross Perot.
Am I going to get equal time?
That'll teach you to use your imagination.
You're going to get all the time you need, Mr. Perot.
Well, it's about time. I've only waited 22 years to get equal time.
Well, it finally happened. The wait was worth it.
Yeah, well, things happen.
Well,
What's that supposed to mean?
But look, my question again, Mr. Perot. First of all, we're honored to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
What the question to you is, many people think that because of you, you were able to elect Bill Clinton president.
Well, that just wasn't my intention.
That wasn't your intention.
We had a grassroots effort, and I wasn't trying to block former President Bush at that time.
So
I'm a businessman.
Now, but the net results, after looking upon it after all these many years, you have to acknowledge that you were responsible in part for electing Bill Clinton. And if that's so, how did you think President Clinton did in office?
Well, before you answer that, do you acknowledge that you are partly responsible for putting Bill Clinton in office?
I would have to say that it may appear to be that way. It wasn't my intention.
It certainly does appear to be.
Wasn't my intention.
But
wasn't your intention. Okay.
It may have been an unintended consequence.
Well, who did you like better? Who was your choice?
That was Al Gore.
Well, the question from Mike is,
who did you like better? Who did you like better? I mean, you were on the campaign hustings with them. You were in those debates. Who'd you like better, Clinton or President Bush?
Well,
George H.W.?
that's a tough question to answer.
We only ask
But
tough
I
questions.
think that at that time, I think that maybe President Clinton would have been the best choice at that time.
Now, when you look back on it, I don't know if you followed this closely, but there were some scandals in the Clinton administration. Did you happen to follow those?
Well, as all Americans, I did.
And what were your thoughts about that? When you thought to yourself, here I put this man in office,
Yeah.
and then what'd you think?
Couldn't he have gotten a better looking intern?
And what was your second question?
No, but I mean, seriously, what did you think about him in terms of his scandals? And
Well,
here he was
that's
impeached.
just a mess.
He was impeached. He wasn't convicted, but he was impeached by the House of Representatives.
I know when I heard the news, like all Americans, I just couldn't believe my ears.
Why didn't you come back?
You know what, Ross? I've never been able to believe your ears. How did you ever end up with ears as large? Not to change the subject.
Well, I didn't think we were going to talk about my childhood. That's where it all started. Calling me Dumbo running around Texas.
Is that what they called you?
They did, and I sure proved them wrong, didn't I?
Well, you sort of did, but is that why that's been a standard line?
Does
You can't
IBM mean anything?
No, what does it mean to you?
Well, it means a lot to me. I helped build that thing.
Now, were your ears always that large, or?
Well, actually, I had a reduction.
Oh my gosh, you had a reduction and they're still that large?
We're talking about my ears still, right?
Yeah, we certainly are.
I guess they are. It is what it is.
Now,
Well, you give new meaning to the phrase, I can't believe my ears, because I have to say I can't.
you were outspoken and you were ahead of your times about the importance of frugality and government expenditures, and now those budget deficits that you were talking about that were in the low billions and alarming to you. Now we're talking about $1 trillion budget deficits and all that bailout. Any ideas that you had on that?
Well, nobody can predict the future on the debt, but it's appalling to me that we have encumbered this much debt. And like I said 20 years ago, and it still applies today, it's time to pick up the shovel and clean out the barn.
Well, Ross, what does that mean?
You don't understand, do you? You're not a farmer, are you?
No, not recently.
You understand that?
I do, yes. I
Well, as long
I
as
think we haven't found a shovel to clean it out.
okay, as long as the two of you understand, it doesn't matter
Well, now,
whether I or the listeners don't
what have you
understand.
been
I guess
doing
that's
with
not
yourself?
relevant.
What have
Okay.
you been doing with yourself all these years now?
Well, I enjoy barbecue.
And what else? Of course, you haven't been spending all your time barbecuing. What else have you been doing?
Well, I'm metal still in business.
You
I
married?
do a lot of consulting.
You still married? And how many grandkids do you have?
A lot.
Is that the answer to are you married or how many grandkids do you have? What a lot.
I'm still married.
And do you still live in Texas, or where are you living?
I
now?
am. I'm in Texas.
How come we never see you anymore? How come we
Well-
never see you on TV?
But we never hear from you.
Yeah.
Well, nobody asks.
Okay, well then.
Is this the first public appearance you've made for?
It is in a long time.
Well, maybe that's why you don't get equal time, because you don't ask.
Well,
You ever thought about that?
I thought about it, but just didn't seem to get around to it.
Now, you did. Everyone said you did remarkably well in those debates between you and Clinton and George H.W. Bush back there in '92. Were you nervous? I mean, how did you feel up on the stage? You didn't have any prior political experience, and you're going up against a governor and a president. How did you feel about that?
Well, all the thing I can say is, look how many times I blinked. I hardly ever blinked the whole damn time.
And that's significant because what?
Why? Because I wasn't nervous. I was telling the truth. Like I said then, I ask you today, who in this room would you leave your children with?
Are you telling me that there's a blink test that will tell us how truthful someone's being?
Yes, I think that's correct. You asked me if I was nervous, and I said no, I wasn't nervous. I wasn't blinking my eyes.
Well, where did you get
General
this?
Stockdale couldn't stop blinking his eyes.
Now that takes us back to the debate, the famous debate between General Stockwell. First of all, let me ask you this: how did you choose your vice presidential?
Oh, good
candidate?
question,
How
Mike.
did you choose him? How did you go about choosing him?
How did you select Stockdale?
Very carefully.
Okay.
And then,
How's that for an answer, smart guy?
now,
I've heard
Stockdale.
better.
Okay, now, do you remember who the other vice presidential nominees were that went up against Stockdale?
Not worth remembering.
Do you remember the vice presidential debate?
Yes, I do.
And were you a little bit disappointed in Stockdale? He didn't seem to do very well. He didn't do as well as you seem to do.
And he blinked a lot.
Yeah, he did. And that could have been his problem. But
You think if he would have blinked less, you could have been president today?
that may be.
It's a possibility,
That
huh?
could be.
But how do you think he did it, and why do you think he may not have done as well as you hoped in those debates?
Well, he wasn't a good public speaker like me.
Well, could it be that he didn't know how to handle those charts and graphs that you so masterfully presented before the American public?
Well, just before the debate, he and I got in a bit of an argument about those charts.
Okay.
And he was tired of carrying them around.
Wasn't that his job as vice presidential candidate, to carry
Apparently
around
he
charts?
didn't think so.
Did you now before the debates?
Oh, so he didn't like the idea of going
Right.
from general to...
Before the debates, did you practice and did you have people that pretended to be President Bush and pretended to be Clinton?
I choose not to answer that one.
That's confidential.
Well, did you have Stockdale practicing carrying the charts and graphs around?
Well, I tried, but like I said, you can't make a mule move when you want it to sometimes.
Is that like getting a horse to drink water, or taking a horse to water but can't get him to drink?
Yeah, in another part of the country, you might say that.
You know, they
Okay.
said that Senator Gore did a little bit better in the debate with Stockdale than and you were there watching that debate. What were you thinking about when Stockdale went up against Senator Gore?
I really didn't like Gore too much. I thought he was kind of stiff. But Stockdale sure made everybody else look after that. I'll tell you that.
If you're just joining us, now, you've missed a great show.
Oh,
I'm Douglas Holbrook,
And this is Mike Aguirre.
and we have enjoyed the time talking with former President Bush, former President Clinton, and would have been wannabe President Perot. You know, I wonder if in this last couple minutes we could bring Clinton and Bush back and have the three of you just kind of
talk
interact
with
a little bit.
Why don't you? Let's see. Let's do that.
Bill, are you still there?
Yeah, Bill.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
And George, are you still there?
Yeah, of course I am.
Okay,
Yeah.
would you mind kind of joining in here at the end of the show?
Let's go.
All
Well,
right.
you know,
And Ross, are you okay with this?
Why, of course I'm here.
Okay.
But no. President Clinton, you've heard some of the discussion that we've had with Ross Perot. What were your ideas about Ross Perot? What did you think about him when you went up against him in the debates?
Well, I always admired Ross. A fine mind, a businessman, great in finance, and I considered having him on my cabinet.
Oh, you did. Now, President Bush, I know you were the campaign manager for your dad in 1992, and
Well, I was handed that, but
and what were your thoughts about Ross Perot when you saw him debating your dad there? And you remember when your dad kept looking at his wristwatch? I'm just wondering if you remember that and how you felt when you saw that.
wristwatch, that I don't recall too much because I was in Kennebunkport, probably drunk in a bar.
Probably.
Well, I think we're out of time.
Well, we're just about out of time, and if
That's
of course,
typical. Half time.
you're going to argue with us about equal time again.
Equal time. That's all I ever
I
asked.
think you kind of have. I'm Douglas Holbrook,
And this is Mike Aguirre.
and we want to thank you all for being with. We want to thank Bill.
Thank you for having me.
We want to thank George,
Yeah, thanks.
and last but not least, we want to thank Ross.
Very much so. Thank y'all.
And we want to thank all of our listeners for joining us on this last on this particular show. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, and I hope you learned something from it.
I think it's very educational.
I hope you found it enlightening, and perhaps, if no other word, maybe you found it imaginative. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for joining us on Talk of the Town with former San Diego City Attorney Mike Aguirre, former political science professor Douglas Holbrook, and special guests courtesy of John Baker Productions, here on KNSJ Descanso 89.1 FM, serving San Diego.